What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian.
And we're back from Mexico.
Yeah, we survived.
Yeah.
I think I have coronavirus, though.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. I've had a weird cough since I got back, which is probably just like being dry on an airplane, but I've decided to be sort of melodramatic about it and say that I have coronavirus to anyone.
Only to the Pete Buttigieg stand we saw like a few days ago.
Yeah, it's just going to be like, take their sign-up sheet and just start coughing all over it. Just be like,
Yeah, just be like, I'm sorry. I'm so excited. Oh, wait. What do you mean we were in Wuhan, China? I thought it was Shenzhen.
Yeah. We're recording on Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling very super, honestly.
I'm feeling average.
Yeah, I'm not feeling good. It's not good. It's
okay.
bad. No, it's bad.
I'm gonna wait till the results come out before I get invested. This is why I don't like watching live election results, because they get you all worked up without like knowing what the actual results are.
I mean, that's true, but like no, I mean, put it this way: there are insurmountable leads in races that Bernie won in 2016 now to Biden, and
yeah,
it looks like Warren is winning a lot of states that. Warren is splitting the vote sufficiently in enough states that Bernie will not get a sufficient number of delegates.
Yeah, because she's a bitch.
Yeah,
and I will stand by that. Warren's a stupid bitch, and everyone should feel bad for supporting her.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, that's feeling a little grim, but we will. Well, actually, we'll be covering that a little later tonight. Our time. If you'll be listening to this after the fact, but on our friend Niall's live stream he does every night. So it's pretty exciting. We'll check it out on Twitter if you come to Twink Rev on Twitter if you want to see where that's happening.
It's okay though. New Zealand has hope. There's a top party.
Yeah, our friend of the show, Johnny O'Hagan Brebner, sent us the observation that New Zealand has a party called the Opportunities Party. Top.
Yeah.
It's a political party, and it's they're radical centrist, which makes it funnier because top energy, radical centrism, trying to find the center.
It's the first tops I found unattractive. No,
yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's a thing that exists, and you should use that to warm your cold heart today.
Yeah, but at least we were in Mexico last week. That was an uplifting week of decompression.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was very warm.
Yeah,
good weather.
That didn't be a little comfortable because we were at like a all inclusive resort, but like I don't know, something about like all the workers being like Mexicans, like taking care of you, just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, it was a lot of Americans and Canadians and
Europeans.
A few Europeans, I'd say, but for the most part, like the bulk of it was Americans and largely from like the Midwest, sort of East Coast sort of thing, like Rust Belt. Being sort of waited on by an enormous staff of sort of what I assume are Mexican precarity workers. Didn't feel totally comfortable. I don't know. We tipped a lot.
Yeah,
I tipped out of a sense of like guilt because we were stuck there. We couldn't get food anywhere other way. So
hey, we took care of a drunk bartender.
Yeah, that did happen. I described that on Twitter in real time. Well, I was quite drunk, but it was nice.
You also like loosely posted a video of me on Twitter, which you took down later, of me doing the wobble.
Yes. So in the chronicles of just like shit that I'm gonna sell to Dabiq magazine, the ISIS magazine, as like chronicles of why America must be destroyed.
Yeah.
The fact that Americans go to fucking Mexico and do those weird synchronized line dances is like number one on the list. The history of just immiserating the global South through sort of American imperialism for a century. Yeah, that's second on the list. Number one is like fucking like one after another. That's the thing. It was like it's the wobble, then it's the electric slide, then the cha-cha slide, and it's the cha-cha slide, and the Chicago slide or whatever. And like I'm just like, why do you all know this? And what has gone wrong in your life? Stop this. Stop this at once.
I'm sorry, your New Zealand culture is depraved and lacking of community fun.
Yeah, no, the great Satan must be destroyed. Its decadence has run too far.
It's your waspy bourgeois decadence that looks down upon working class people from the Midwest enjoying their 1 week of vacation.
No, it's not. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying don't do it in fucking Mexico.
Why?
Because there was like just constant like shitty generic Nashville like country music, like pop country. You're sort of like
the country was worse.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then punctuated with like novelty singles from the U.S.
Hey, we April a dance, so
yeah. Well, Mexico has musicians, right?
There wasn't any. It was a DJ.
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying. Well, anyway, I'm not a fan. Not a fan of the synchronized weird ass like action dances.
Well, people on Twitter said it was seductive and titillating, so you're in the minority. Even though I can't dance for shit, but it's okay. When you have enough, actually, I didn't need I'd have tequila that night.
There was tequila involved.
But there was no margarita. That was actually the funny thing. Someone was like, "Oh, how are the margaritas?" And I didn't have a margarita until like the second last day of the trip.
Yeah, we were sadly remiss there, and the margaritas were excellent, but we didn't start drinking them until fairly late in the piece.
We had a lot of Cuban rum.
Yeah. We brought back some Cuban rum too, which is exciting. Apparently, that's legal.
There's a person screaming outside.
Wow, yeah, somebody's just having a full-on psychiatric episode outside. They must really love the Shahid Buttar like window sign I have with a Bernie sticker up.
They
the window
also saw the Warren spoiling results and were like, "Motherfucker!"
Yeah. In fairness, that person is sort of me right now. I'm screaming on the inside.
Yeah, it was funny in Mexico because we were there seeing some. I think my parents and some of their family friends, and whenever politics came up, they're all like, "Yeah, fucking Hillary, we fucking hate her." And it was like people who were like from any side of the aisle were like, "No, I wouldn't vote for her." And then they're like, "Oh yeah, no, Bernie." And even
they're
if
like he's cool.
They're like, "We like him."
Yeah.
And there was actually one night my mom, who's not political at all, was like, I watched a Bernie video and I really liked what he was saying. I'm a little nervous, but like about what we had done because like they're like workers in like the Midwest where like nothing's really changed despite jumps of like right wing to like Democrats, But she was like, I watched a Warren video. She was a fucking bitch. And I was like, at first I was like, wait, is she going to be like, oh, I liked her or I hate her? And I was like, no, she was like a bitch. She seemed like a know-it-all and I just did not like her.
Fake know-it-all was the judgment on Elizabeth Warren, which true. PolitiFact.com, fact checker, finds that claim is true. 100% true.
And just for like context, my mom's not like a traditionalist in any aspect. She's like, the women are like the top bitches. So she's like, doesn't like this person who's like trying to be like boss bitch energy, but like is just completely like insufficient. And it's kind of like a nerdy whiner. Like,
yeah, it's the whiner effect.
Yeah, it's not working on the middle class Americans apparently. So
yeah, well, God no, it's enough. It's enough to stop Bernie winning apparently.
But I guess we also saw a Fidel Castro portrait at the cigar table, which kind of was relevant because of the controversy around Bernie's comments on Cuba.
Yeah, so Bernie, in the most mild manner possible, praised some of the accomplishments of Cuba's hideous authoritarian government regime,
their dictatorship.
Specifically in the areas of education and healthcare. And a bunch of people, went into a very sort of like manufactured outrage. They decided that this was unacceptable, and they started frantically Googling, American Enterprise Institute articles about Cuba and the Wikipedia plot summary on Cuba. and they were like, but didn't you know it's a horrible authoritarian regime?
Yeah.
And Bernie's like, in his original comments, was like, look, I disagree with so much of what they've done, but I think they've made some great strides or great progress.
What was the literacy program that he particularly pointed out?
Yeah.
Which, like, when you look at the results, the World Bank, which is not a bastion for, like, loving countries that have socialist governments, but even them, they're like, oh, no, there's 100% literacy now in the country, which is higher than the U.S. literacy rate, which means saying that's a good thing is bad now.
Oh, yeah. So the Galaxy Brain takes were sort of somewhere between, like, I can't believe he would say this. There's people then, I don't know, kind of in a debate nerd way, but it was fine. We're pointing out, like, and digging up the videos of Obama saying exactly the same thing, where he's like, they've made great strides in education and literacy. But the other take was that, yes, they taught them to read, but they only taught them to read totalitarian propaganda.
What country would do that?
Yeah. Could we please open our history books to look at the founding stories of the United States?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America. Yeah. We never do anything weird and indoctrinating in this country. Yeah, so the idea that they actually literacy programs are bad. Literacy is bad because it could lead to people reading propaganda that's not American propaganda.
Yeah.
And that would be a bad thing.
And we can never acknowledge that Cuba has ever done anything good. A country that has a life expectancy that's longer now than the U.S. while having a nationalized healthcare system. I don't
know if you can tell Sam's tired.
I am tired. It's been a long week.
Yeah, he's I'm a little tired, but it's just my coronavirus.
Yeah, I got up really early today, so it's not my fault.
Yeah.
Usually I sleep in because I'm a lazy bitch. They're also one of 8 countries to actually have like an accomplished like sustainability award from the World Wildlife Fund. One of 8 in the whole world, and they're also rated one of the like lowest poverty rated countries of any developing nation in the whole world.
Yeah, there's effectively no homelessness. That's not to say there's not a lot of deprivation there, but you could definitely point at the fact that it's an incredibly poor country.
Yeah.
Not because of some inherent property of its economy, except that to say it was effectively a slave economy followed by a sort of just colonial outpost, the United States.
What are you talking about? They were riddled with gambling and liberating sex workers everywhere.
Yes.
For the, white bourgeois class of the West.
Right. And so to the extent that it was already sort of incredibly just impoverished by imperialism. And then, was placed under an embargo, which remains to this day. And it's one of the most brutal embargoes. I mean, the U.S. does not maintain an embargo of this magnitude with any other country. I mean, a trade with Iran was much easier, and say, I don't know, if you wanted to like sell weapons to Iran, there were easier ways to do that than there were to just like, I don't know, sell some like humanitarian supplies to Cuba.
Yeah.
So
also, it's amazing that they've been under this embargo for so long and what they've accomplished being so restricted. I mean, they created a lung cancer vaccine. They're the first country to completely end mother-to-child transmission of HIV and syphilis, or any hepatitis, of any country in the world. They give free transgender surgery for everyone who needs it.
There's also a fun history, right, of the Cuban government offering aid to places like the U.S. during Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, which we rejected.
Yes, we said no.
They have the most doctors per 1,000 people anywhere in the world.
Yeah, you were telling me this the other day. It's like 8 per 1,000, whereas the rest of the world's like 2, or the U.S. is like 2 point something.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. See? And to become a doctor is free if you are Cuban, and very cheap if you're not.
A lot of Americans actually go there for the medical degrees.
Yes, Caribbean medical schools have an interesting and storied history in terms of there was this medical school set up in Grenada.
Yeah.
And then basically the civil unrest, as in basically a populist dissatisfaction in Grenada, was what Reagan used as his pretext to go send Marines and invade Grenada. Was that there was like 30 American medical students at this medical school in Grenada, and then most of them stayed. They were rescued. They were rescued by tanks rolling up on the beaches or whatever, and literally they were like, "Oh yeah, we were fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to stay and finish my studies."
It's always funny. People were like, when I posted about that, they were like, "Well, you see the boats coming one way, but not the other." But there was a recent article of like tons of Cuban dissidents trying to get citizenship back in Cuba because they're growing old. Like, oh, I can't get health care in the U.S., or it's really isolating and alienating, or the benefits are just really shitty, or stuff like that. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, and like
Asada Shakur.
Yeah,
she went there.
Well, yes, she may be under some duress. Yeah, I don't know. Of course, the other attack that is employed against Cuba is that Castro was bad on the gays in 1960 something.
Yeah, he never apologized. Oh wait, he did.
Oh yeah, he did in the 70s.
Yeah,
in the 70s he said, "Look, I was wrong." It was a, and to be clear, right? I mean, the attitude of Cuba, this sort of state policy of Cuba towards LGBT identified individuals at the time was not good, and because it was largely associated with a sort of a bourgeois impulse.
Yeah,
that was the idea, is that it was a sort of decadence
and a machismo nature of the culture.
Yeah, so it was not well received. But the fact that in the 70s, when the U.S. was still doing, like, considering homosexuality a diagnosable mental illness, and conversion therapies and huge amounts of state repression was happening. Yeah, Castro was backpedaled at all and said, "Whoops, I was wrong."
Yeah, in the 90s, there was I think it was 98, the May Day, not protest, but like parade.
May Day parade.
Was led by drag queens. While like in Texas,
so repressive.
You're going to jail still for committing sodomy until like 2003.
Yeah, Lawrenceville, Texas, yeah.
And now when you look at the current climate of LGBT rights in the country, there's universal transgender surgery. There's free PrEP for the whole for anyone in the country.
One day we'll get that in the U.S.
They just recently had their first like sermon, like a Christian sermon, where they brought in like 3 different like transgender priestesses, I think, to do like a sermon and stuff, like, which is pretty cool. Like,
sure.
Especially knowing like the history of like the Catholic community in Islands being the ones that are the most against like homosexuality. They have sex, which basically is utilizing data to figure out which the key areas are to build tolerance, and like their focus is on like family like a few years ago, and they've created movies showing like gay and bisexual representation to like to change the stigma, like show like, oh, this is things too. And it is one of the most gay friendly countries in the Caribbean and one of the top ones in Latin America.
I mean, I think what people kind of miss about like the authoritarian label is sort of thrown around in a rather lazy way, which not to say there was not all sorts of state repression. Yeah. But we've like, I don't know, not to get all like standpoint theory on you, but like the way we judge what freedoms matter and which ones do not is entirely based on our cultural context. When so basically the thing is, yes, there are forms of repression in Cuba and in all places. There are different forms of repression in the U.S. Yeah. And different forms of exploitation or different authoritarian tendencies. Try not paying your rent in the U.S. and see how that goes for you. Like in Cuba, not an issue, as it turns out. Yeah. So it's freedom of the press has always been a difficult thing there. But like
a lot of it's overblown as well,
right? And so it's not like there's no freedom of the press. It's merely that there are certain forms of state censorship or state repression. in the U.S., we still have the Espionage Act on the books. I mean, it is used.
We also have corporate censorship.
Well, sure, we have taxing, but I mean, we have actual state censorship. We have national security letters, things which are deigned to not be in the public interest or not in the national interest, can be prevented from being published.
Yeah.
Cuba has a similar, and has always had a similar idea, right, of things that are not in the national interest, however that is defined. The state will sometimes work to repress those or suppress those, and just as every country does. It's sort of it's your nation state framework, and we've always used this very lazy thing of like, it's not the exact same set of concerns, therefore it's it's bad. That's evil and bad.
They're a dictator, despite there being elections and stuff. Which last time I checked, there's no elections in dictatorships. But also
elections.
The city of Miami, as a result of Bernie's comments on the Cuba literacy program, is holding in April an anti-communism concert, which is hilarious. Because Miami is not riddled with like Venezuelan and Nicaraguan and Cuban migrants who
self-exiled,
who are like, oh, Fidel Castro took my parents' sugar monopoly and it was horrible. Like every single article I've seen like the past few days, I've read them and they're all like, oh, their business got taken over. And it's like, yeah, because you're exploiting labor and they're trying to, I guess, like entrepreneurship's not a value that's like necessarily good because it's often just a term to defend capitalists. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, there's the classic mold of like, anytime you scratch the surface on some of the people, and, I don't want to say nobody has a legitimate grievance or whatever against any state or any power structure whatsoever, but the people who are most vocal and say work for like U.S. media outlets.
Yeah.
You scratch the surface and you're like, oh, your grandparents literally like worked in the Batista regime as, prison guard attendants or, owned copper mines or whatever the fuck it is. Like,
it's like that.
It's just such like clockwork. It's such a cliche at this point.
It's like the Anna Navarro who was on like The View, like being like, I was educated under the Sandinistas, and it's like, your dad was a Contra. Like, you're not a person I want to listen to when Contras were like literally raping nuns and like getting people
setting
alive.
school children on fire and shit like that. They were, that's your every time that attack line gets used against Bernie, I'm always just chuckling along. I'm just like, that was the correct side to be on. There were two sides to that particular conflict.
Yeah.
The Sandinistas, a popular, they never actually said they were Marxist. Let's call them a popular socialist. Government, pretty extreme, armed, but like wildly popular.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side was international backed, like just death squads who were fighting against a popular government on the behalf of sort of the displaced capitalist interests. There's a correct side in that war, and it's not the fucking Contras.
Yeah. But it's okay. We have no issues in American democracy. I mean,
it's perfect.
Today's Super Tuesday, and nothing like crazy is going on at all, except for, Tom Steyer, Amy Klobuchar, and Pete Buttigieg all dropping out before Super Tuesday to consolidate the centrist vote, while Elizabeth Warren stays in, splitting, I'm going to say progressive, even though I hate that term, vote.
Yeah, like the slightly left of center vote.
Yeah. And
the you don't have to die if you're poor vote, maybe, like would be the most descriptive label.
Well, I don't think she cares about that. But,
no, I'll give her the like idea that I don't think she's malevolent in that regard. I think she would, all things being equal, in a market that is functioning well, according to her definition, and this is her primary concern, is about like the functioning of markets.
Yeah.
That she would say a market that is functioning well doesn't result in all the poor people dying of preventable illnesses or whatever. Like, but it turns out, like that it's still like the market that is primary, making sure that like capital markets don't fall apart.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I know a lot of people keep saying Bernie is the FDR Democrat type, but I think in many ways she's much more like that because her sole interest is preserving capitalism. Well, at least from like my understanding, Bernie is less concerned about utilizing social programs to preserve the capitalist institutions. Like he's much more. I think he's a socialist. I mean, that doesn't really matter. Like,
Yeah, I think he's pushing for a variety of sort of popular social democratic reforms.
Yeah,
I believe that his approach, in terms of sort of regarding the existing power structures as sort of incidental to the work of getting these things done, is his personal convictions are socialist. I'm certain of it. Like, no reason to doubt that's true.
yeah,
People, I think, get into a little bit of a gotcha where they're like, yes, but his policies are social democratic, or whatever. You're like, yeah, but his theory of change is that it's work, like mass worker power is the way you get things like universal health care. It's not like Nancy Pelosi clapping in the correct way or whatever, which is Warren's sincere belief, right? She says she's the candidate that can get it done because she has a sort of wonkish plan. She's done the homework.
yeah,
That fucking phrase. And that she can make the compromises and build the coalition within the halls of power. Bernie's like, fuck all that.
yeah. I mean, also when
Jim.
you compare his platform to those of like prior, like populist socialist candidates in the U.S., whether it's like on a local level or on the federal level, he's very similar in the same policy approaches. And it makes sense why they're so similar because the U.S. never really achieved them while much of Europe pushed them along. And as long as we operate within a liberal democracy, we're not going to have like revolutionary socialism, like seizing everything, like what Cuba did or like Soviet Union. So you have to operate within a certain framework until that kind of comes along. So
Yeah, I mean the
like what it's kind of funny. People are like, oh, these older people who ran a socialist, they were socialists, but now Bernie's saying it when he never advanced at all, but beyond those points. And it's like now he's a social dem, and he's like Denmark, and it's like, okay,
yeah, I mean, and to the extent that some of the more successful attempts at seizing power have largely been done in times of sort of societal upheaval.
yeah,
It's times of instability, be it like the Soviet Union and the sort of just the collapse of Tsarist Russia, right? And World War One was hugely significant there, or
decolonialism.
yeah, I mean Cuba essentially having an incredibly brutal dictatorship that was becoming unsustainable. Like the Batista regime was just milking, just like bleeding the country dry.
Yeah,
To the point where it could not be sustained anymore, and therefore there was sort of an appetite.
yeah,
Vietnam, right? The French, the collapse of the sort of French power structure there, and a long-running civil war gave the opportunity for people to seize power. The U.S. we have liberal democracy all the way down. It's hideous, unending neoliberalism, and so there is no, the contradictions are heightened every day, but it turns out it's been quite adaptable in ways that maybe other places were not. And so, yeah, you're going to keep getting that. You're going to keep getting more of the same. And like, you kind of have to do something within that framework to at least make a start.
yeah. But I mean, getting back to this Super Tuesday and our liberal democracy shitstorm, is there hope for our Warren stands? I mean, after seeing kind of the results slowly coming in, I don't want to jump to conclusions because they're not fully in yet, but it seems like she's definitely wrecking.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
it.
Bernie's not winning by enough.
Yeah.
And, it looks like Texas might go to him. California polls just closed 1 minute ago at the time of recording, so we'll see how that goes. But, like, I don't know, if you'd asked me before the polls started closing this morning, or this afternoon, sorry, I would have said, yeah, we can bring the Warren people on side. Now I'm just like, no, fuck them all.
Yeah.
Well,
they didn't budge. I mean, I saw people, at least in like California, be like, some like, oh, I support Warren, but I'm going to jump to Bernie because he has the best chance. But everyone I've seen who's part of the Democratic machine in San Francisco or Berkeley or Oakland, they never budged. They're still like, Warren can win this. And it's
Yeah.
because Warren is a wrecker candidate, and I think she's literally sticking in. And her whole goal's been to split the Bernie vote and be a tool for Biden. I wouldn't be surprised if she actually tries to become Biden's VP.
Well, I mean, she clearly avoided running in 2016 to make way for Hillary.
Yeah.
I don't think I quite buy the full argument that she's like purely a wrecker. I think she's personally ambitious, and I think she has a a vision for the country that is pretty fucking stark, but is separate from Bernie's one.
Well, I think she's a wrecker in self-interest. I think she's like, oh, I can be either the president, and probably she realized that's not the tool, so she's going to become VP of someone.
Yeah, there'll be that, or there's still the idea, and this has come out of the campaign and the surrogates, and even just like rank and file supporters, to the extent that they exist, has been the idea that she will be the compromise candidate from a contested convention, and that the Bernie and Biden will fail to get a majority of votes or delegates, and therefore they will they will, neither of them will budge from their ideological positions, and she will sail in as the unity candidate who can unite the parties, which is nonsense. For one, she just like doesn't actually have a base of support. She needs a lot more support to be able to be credible in that way. Like Bloomberg would be would have a stronger case for that. He'd be a worse president, don't get me wrong, but he has a stronger case at this point. But in terms of like understanding the liberal fetish for Elizabeth Warren, it's a bit trite at this point, but it's the PMC thing, the professional managerial class, or the petite bourgeoisie. Like they are the little capitalists. They sort of act as the bagmen for capital. And they haven't had the same loss of status the workers in America have had.
Yeah.
So Warren represents the nerdy appeal. She's the wonk. She's the idea that she's done the homework because she puts her hands up and gets good grades in class. It's like it's a weird like fetishistic or I mean, dare I say it, parasocial kind of idea that's like you these sort of overachieving nerd types in Silicon Valley see themselves in her.
Well, I think I kind of tweeted this yesterday in like a semi like irony poisoned way, as I do on Twitter at like late at night, but also like a very serious way. Is the reason these people voted for these centrist liberal candidates, and I tie in Warren to all of that, is because it's intellectually lazy enough for them. It makes them feel comfortable enough. They're not willing to actually contemplate with the issues within our economic, political system. And as a result, it's basically the deep anti-intellectual legacy we've kind of adopted in the broader society. Like intellectualism is no longer viewed as like good or proper. It's like, oh, I don't want to actually look into the system. But Warren kind of teeters on that, but not in a way that's uncomfortable.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around. I thought her whole shtick was that she appeals to like the kind of intelligentsia in terms of like she's the like I'm a Harvard. She's leaning into like I'm a Harvard professor. I do plans. I do complicated plans. I do spreadsheets.
No, but I mean it in the intelligent kind of way of like it's you can be intelligent and never actually diverge from the mainline thought process.
Oh, totally.
Like they're never gonna
that's her.
Like Warren plays off aesthetic radicalism while actually never moving beyond capitalism, compared to like an actual intellect would actually look into other programs or ideologies or options. Like
I would take a more to allow me to be class reductionist for a moment. I would say she is of the PMC. I mean, she's
totally.
She is wealthy for one. Her personal net worth is $12 million or something. So she is wealthy. And then the other part being her donor base are not affected by the outcomes of these political contests. So
That's why I mean it's lazy. Like they're comfortable.
They're self-interested. I don't know if it's lazy. It's just literally acting in their own self-interest.
Well, they have the luxury to be lazy.
Exactly. Yeah, there are no stakes to any of this. So the idea that she goes up against Trump and there's a sort of like Harry Potter, West Wing, Game of Thrones, like bizarre narrative overlaid on it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, to the extent that she's going to vanquish the bad man, is all very, well, it's cringe as fuck for one, but it's also like it underplays the fact that head-to-head polling suggests she will lose to Trump. Bad Cheeto Man 45.
Yeah.
And her entire project is one of keeping the system operating for people like her.
Yeah. Well, so workers aren't buying it. Like a lot of people who are voting for her are of like that professional managerial class.
Right. BuzzFeed writers and fucking...
Or like college students who have never actually had like a legitimate job and had to pay their full bills. Like even like I'm only been out of school for a few years, and I would say getting an actual job and dealing with like rent costs and like bills and be like, oh, this shit fucking sucks, and help me like move farther to the left because I realized, oh, this isn't actually really fucking sucks once you're actually involved.
Yeah,
I think
graduating to the working class.
Yeah, because like a lot of college students are of a semi part in that PMC class. Like they're all into like academia and have very little like real world outcomes for a lot of the ones who would be supporting like Warren.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly that's the point, which is to say that yes, if your material sort of conditions are completely taken care of, in this case by your parents or the ability to access sort of student financing instruments of whatever kind, then you're like think about that for a second. Our definition of worker is like, do you have to sell your labor to ensure your means of survival? Clearly, if you're a child in college whose parents were able to finance your college years, well, no, you don't work. You don't rely on selling your labor.
Yeah,
you're not part of the working class.
Well, so
like
her campaign is like been extremely alienating to a broad base of workers. I mean, going back to like our Mexico trip and people we were with, like I think a lot of people would look at them and brush them off as like, oh, they're probably just Trump people and are never going to vote for like a Bernie candidate because like they like their guns and hunting and they go to church a lot and like, I don't know, they're white, and the reality is like, oh,
they're not wealthy.
They're working free jobs. Yeah. They have friends. They have children like have to go on to state healthcare because they can't afford all of it. Like these people
who work. I mean, the interesting like test, which so I was not familiar with the term third shift job.
Oh yeah,
I'm familiar with the idea. Like I understand the concept, but I had not that's maybe a uniquely American way to refer to it. And I so when I kind of got back here, I started asking people, just my Bay Area PMC fellows. I'm like, do you know what a third shift job is? They don't.
My mom used to work a third shift job. It was like I think it was like 10 to like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Sometimes like an 11 till 7 a.m.
A lot of young people who don't go to college, like from my hometown, because of like issues of like drugs or like petty like marijuana offenses, or even like they don't have the money for
few
it.
Opportunities.
End up working in like factory jobs where it's like you're working third shift, and it's
right.
Like
it's the worst. It's the worst shift. So of course, if you're newest in the labor market, you're younger or whatever, this is what you get. This is the work you can access.
Yeah.
And so you're meeting a bunch of people who are like, this is the only labor of theirs they can sell is between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. or whatever in a crappy factory job for not a lot of money with no accompanying security. Just think how alien that is from your kind of like suburban wine moms who, I don't know, work in a profession.
Yeah.
And relate to Elizabeth Warren because that's her. She's a former college professor turned sort of state bureaucrat under
Yeah.
Obama, and she's very wealthy. She's intellectual with all the signifiers of that. She's smart, right? She's smart nerd,
Yeah.
and they see themselves in that. They're like, this is relatable.
Yeah.
This is what life is like.
I mean, think of like Silicon Valley, for an example. Like a lot of their jobs are like dreams that most Americans could never even like imagine. Like, oh, I think I remember like mentioning like, oh, there's people that get pet insurance, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I rarely get like good insurance. Like,
Yeah, so most people in this country, struggle to find meaningful health insurance, and
Like-
there are plenty of companies in Silicon Valley that will insure your pets for you.
they give you like free lunch, and there's like all these like luxuries that like people don't even get. They barely get. Most people don't even get $15 in like a lot of middle American
No.
states.
Well, and the other thing being like labor markets being what they are, the other unique distortion for like engineers and whatever designers and things like that in Silicon Valley is if you lose your job or you don't like your job, you can go get another one. That this is just not the case for a lot of people. There is no, you can't walk across the street and get an equivalent or better job.
Yeah.
There's just there is no other employment, or you'll be back on third shift. Maybe you worked your way off that to actually be allowed to be like awake during daylight hours.
There's the luxury also of working only one job.
Oh yeah,
Like
no,
one of
people
my
work
parents' friends,
multiple jobs.
I was surprised. Oh, I work 3 jobs, and one of them's like a night job, just like watching an old, like wealthy white woman, and it's like,
Watching an Elizabeth Warren voter.
like no one should have to work 3 jobs to like take care of their family. Like,
Yeah, no, it's a travesty, and so that's where the identification of people identification with people like Pete Buttigieg or Elizabeth Warren as like your ideal is literally about identification. It's telling you something a lot about your friends who are big into Warren or Buttigieg. He's gone, the rat. Goodbye. They're telling you something about their approach to their own material security often.
yeah,
And if your concerns are kind of procedural and technocratic, and you believe in this sort of meritocratic vision of like, well, she's the most qualified because she does the most homework and she gets the most A's and she graduated valedictorian.
yeah,
Or Buttigieg in his like speaking Norwegian and knowing facts, trivia facts, whatever, and reciting them on command is you're just telling on yourself, really.
I mean, I think for a while people were like, oh, we can save these people and all come to the Bernie side. But like, even if they do, they're still, I don't think they're savable. Their class interests just are so ingrained in so many of them that it's not really worth our time focusing on like PMCs when there's like millions of working people or even like unemployed or like people like in the US and around the world that are not being addressed. Like so much of politics is focused on the professional managerial class who view this as like a game, that we're completely ignoring these people. And I think the Bernie campaign's been really good at it, but I think even then it's kind of teetered on like some of the like a middle ground where it could have done more to like appeal to the bases.
Well, yeah, you have to not let yourself be baited. If you run in sort of PMC circles, which if you're in college, if you work as sort of a professional job, if you live in a coastal city,
Nonprofits.
yep, any of that sort of stuff, you're going to be surrounded by these people.
Yeah.
These are your friends, and some of them are very nice, and many of them, right, have seen through the lie of all of this. But the ones who are like honestly on Super Tuesday hanging on to the dream that Warren's 9% national support is going to translate to her somehow beating Donald Trump or something, and who are making the sort of these incredibly sophisticated arguments about qualifications,
Yeah.
or having plans, and actually her and Bernie really want the same thing, but she's the one to get it done, and like just forget about them. They're speaking out of their own class interest, and you should not allow them to divert you.
Yeah.
away from the actual project, which is, as you say, right? I mean, there's tens of millions of people who still in this election will not vote. And they're the people who are working 3 jobs and the people who worry about health care and things. And like, you can go and talk to them and you can speak directly to their class interests. And Bernie's campaign can speak directly to their class interests. You're not going to save your friend who's a part-time nonprofit fundraiser trust fund kid or some shit. They're just not going to.
It's a waste of time. Like telling someone who's like, I don't know, in Kansas or Wisconsin or Florida, like, oh, there's a person that wants to make sure you don't die because you can't get insulin, or you don't go into debt because you can't afford, college, is going to be much more resonating than like trying to talk to someone who makes like $150,000 in like San Francisco or New York City. Like, oh, this person wants to give stuff, but it'll be a little more taxes possibly for like the rich people. And they're like, oh, I don't know about that, because
I like that those people think they're rich enough to be affected by wealth taxes.
Yeah, it's just
hilarious.
sad. And don't waste your time on them.
Yeah.
And no matter what happens in the Democratic debate race, I think I forgot who tweeted it, but it was like, if Bernie wins, unionize like hell. If Trump wins, which is probably the other option of like actual winning, unionize like hell. Like,
I think that was our friend Average at Best, Philip Mooney on
that's what it was. Yeah,
on Twitter.
Yeah,
Good friend of the pod. Who, if you're listening to this, come on the fucking pod already.
Yeah, get it together.
We've been trying to schedule him for months, and we're just gonna publicly call him out.
We're just gonna show up to his house and be like, "We're here, bitch."
Yeah. So speaking of the Bernie campaign, and bowing to the wine mom PMC crew, Perma Ben on Twitter, Ben Mora.
Yeah, he got fired for being mean.
So if you missed this story, he's just the greatest shit poster of our generation.
He should come on our podcast too.
Yeah.
Shit post him, guys, and tell him to come on Twink Revolution.
Yeah. Well, he's actually off Twitter again on that account, and I'm not going to dox his new private account.
Okay.
But so he was really locked into sort of like gay left Twitter, but he was just absolute king. And so he had a private account on Twitter where he had a few thousand followers. He followed a few hundred people, including us. Just humble brag.
Yeah.
No, he's one of my favorite Twitter personalities. And then he kind of locked it all down and became very inactive because he got a job with the Bernie campaign as like I want to say like Ohio field.
Michigan.
Was it Michigan? There you go.
Yeah.
So some shitty flyover state where people with 3 jobs and who don't vote for Elizabeth Warren live. Whatever.
It's okay. It's all the lead poisoning in their brains.
Yeah. No, anyway, he got a job with the Bernie campaign as a sort of like field organizer. And the dude had already been busting his ass for the Bernie campaign. Like he'd been volunteering like hell. He got some, I guess, paid position. And he was off doing that, and he was not tweeting. He was not shit posting. He would occasionally post some like just pretty mainline Bernie stuff to yet again a private account. You cannot at people. You can't sort of harass people. And he posted. Have you got some of the tweets there?
Yeah, I'm bringing them up right now.
So some shithead journalist from the Daily Beast followed him, and then basically screenshot a lot of old tweets. And then wrote this long article about how the Bernie bro, who's a part of the Bernie campaign in his official capacity as a Bernie bro, was harassing supporters of other campaigns.
Okay, I have some. And
so to be clear, I just want to be incredibly clear. You cannot harass from a private account. It's not possible because they cannot read it. You can shout at them all you want, but they literally can't read it. So he was doing shit posting jokes. Like, what do you got?
Warren is an adult fight diaper fetishist at her core, let's be honest. And someone was like, laugh my ass off. And then he replies, she never shuts the fuck up about daddy's mommy's goo at ga rubber ducky bullshit. He also tweets about her she lied about having Native American ancestry to get into Harvard. That's not slander. That's a true fact.
That's true. Here's one of my favorites. Amy Klobuchar's face looks like that optical illusion where it's an old lady, but also a young woman, depending on how you look at it. But with her, it's just two different old ladies. King.
Here's a good one. Let's autocorrect finish a sentence for you. Elizabeth Warren has lied about being blank. He says, for me, it's Elizabeth Warren has lied about being fat.
Could never trust Buttigieg because he combines the natural devious disposition inherent in gay men with a bloodthirsty careerist drive. Sorry, Ben is a gay, gay and Latinx. And yeah, so he got fired. So this shitty article came out. The Bernie campaign fired him, which, they had to. It sucks. It sucks that they had to do it. But they got run off. He got run all around the Bernie campaign.
I have one more.
Yeah, please just keep going. We can just do this all day.
This one's amazing.
His content is better than ours.
He tweeted about Jonathan Van Ness, who we hate. He tweeted, I think it was a picture of Jonathan Van Ness, and it says, trying to look hot while Daddy Ronald Reagan watches him die of AIDS. And I have a picture. Let me find it really quickly. And it's Jonathan Van Ness retweeting a bunch of the posts after he gets Ben gets fired. And he's like, I hate Twitter. Let me find it really. Where the fuck is it? Oh, here it is. He says, fuck Twitter.
Oh, he's
and
the
posts are like, yeah, fuck Jonathan Van Ness, capitalist pig who doesn't care if poor HIV victims are suffering from lack of access to full medical care. Or if Bernie bros don't stop bullying Jonathan Van Ness, he'll push another cat off a building.
Here, I got another good Ben Mora one.
Okay.
Chasten Buttigieg has the vibes of a housewife whose slow-burning repression is leading to an inevitable psychotic break. Mark my words, in 10 years he will go missing and then resurface in Fort Lauderdale after getting busted for running a meth racket with a bunch of Guatemalan twinks. Oh, so good.
And Ben released a video, I think, a day after he canceled it, and basically talked about, here's why I'm like, for what he's not angry, he's just using humor, which these people have no sense of like humor because
it's
they're
irony poisoned hilarity.
But he's like, if there is anger, it's because I'm from a working class background where we've been suffering, and I'm tired of this shit, and he wanted to change. And he's still supporting Bernie despite having to be removed. Which like.
Oh yeah, no, he's going to. I mean, I don't think he's mad at the Bernie campaign. He understands why it had to happen, and I think he was very gracious and is still out doing everything he can to help Bernie win. It's
like the guy.
It sucks for him.
It's like the guy who did like the, I have a dream video. Who's gonna be? And then like got removed.
I have a wet dream. Yeah,
and it's because the media is so adamant in like persecuting any person of like anything problematic. It's not because. They hate these people, but
well, I mean, it's also, don't forget the Bernie bro narrative was the same as the Obama boys narrative that was both an invention of the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Yeah,
and so the media has just spun it back up, and they've kept trying to use the same line. The problem is it's actually relatively hard to find like contextual instances of like somebody with any following whatsoever, any platform whatsoever, being a Bernie bro.
Mm-hmm.
So this was just an absolute gold mine. So they ran with it.
Yeah.
And the same with the I have a wet dream, whatever. It was like, look, he's a terrible, toxic human being.
Yeah, this gay Latino.
Yeah. Well, this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway. Anyway, hope wonderful things happen for Ben.
Come on the pod.
Come on the pod, Ben.
If you listen.
Yeah. He doesn't listen. But tweet at him. He should. Yeah.
But this whole progressive like Warren shit seems to actually be having a really negative effect of like this hyper wokeness, and have been moving some of our LGBT brothers and sisters to the right. There was a video from YouTuber Arielle Scarcella. I probably butchered that. She's an Italian
Scarcella.
She's an Italian American lesbian, and she did a video like last week titled "I'm a lesbian woman and I'm leaving the insane quotations progressive left," and basically quotes a bunch of reasons of like, here's here's my issues with this. I mean, for one, none of that's the left, dear. What left? But
Yeah.
it shows that this hyper woke, like class 3 narrative is alienating, and I thought it's because I'm Dave Rubin.
Yes.
You're like, yes, move to the classical liberals. I'm like, so basically,
Ew.
you're saying all you did is move from one type of liberalism to the other. But
Yeah. Bad liberalism to worse liberalism. And yeah, so I saw this, and I thought, gee, I understand that impulse.
yeah,
And I knew people when Milo was in his ascendance before he went like full alt-right, but when he was just like triggering the SJWs,
yeah,
I had quite a few friends who were very, very into that. Like they liked that message. It felt transgressive, and it felt like, unbuttoning your trousers. Somehow like somebody sort of saying the thing that everyone has sort of thought about this stuff, which is to say like, gee, there's a lot of internal contradictions here, and if you say them out loud, you are a Nazi fascist.
yeah,
So I was not surprised to see that she's gone through this journey. I mean, she's a thinking rational person, and has I'm sure experienced a sort of the horrible dark side of all of this, which is to say it's sort of the death of your ability to express an idea tentatively.
yeah,
You must have the certainty of scripture. You must have God on your side before you dare open your mouth.
Well, I think because she's been doing this for 10 years, and like of doing like LGBT content and seeing long-time LGBT activists who maybe have not conventionally popular beliefs in the modern context being like persecuted despite all their work to, make life a little bit easier for the rest of us, or seeing topics which should be addressed and completely ignored by like the LGBT establishment, like, people utilizing their identity to like be sexual predators or like stuff like that, or like there was like the she pointed to the what the fuck is that Canadian like trans
Jessica
Yaniv,
yeah,
or like stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and those are like, I do think there's something suspicious when people maybe fixate on those things, or
Totally.
but if you sort of do take it in some, it's incredibly dispiriting.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't had the moment of kind of being shrieked at, and go, wait, like why did, like, I don't belong here. This is not a political identity that makes any sense to me.
Yeah.
And to the extent that there's really no left, like,
Yeah, exactly.
it bears repeating over and over again. There is no left.
Also,
the thing we have is a left, a sort of nascent left surrounded by a sea of liberals as far as the eye can see. And unfortunately, you will not, you could go your entire life in that milieu and never meet another sort of sincere leftist. I mean that, like, even just having any sort of like economic program.
Yeah. Also, like the connotation of like progressive leftism is kind of in contradiction when you look at the like historical context of these meanings. Progressivism is deeply rooted in like the puritanical culture of the U.S. and race science and like things that the left completely rejects. It's also
some parts left.
Also,
I don't.
Progressivism is deeply entrenched in like bourgeois like ethics. That it's kind of like to conflate the two is just kind of silly, and it's
right. The historical confusion is from the idea that like sort of Marxism as the theoretical foundation for scientific socialism was part of a materialist movement. It was the idea that like science will advance the frontiers of our knowledge, and there's nothing beyond our interrogation using a sort of framework of empiricism.
Yeah.
And progressivism was sort of founded on the same principles. But that's sort of where the similarities sort of end there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when people are like, Warren's not a progressive. And it's like, no, she is.
No,
like,
she is.
Literally, her intro to her presidential campaign was her releasing like 23andMe or Ancestry thing of this is my native ancestry via genetics, which is literally like utilizing race science. If you look at the history, being native is tied to nationhood. It's not tied to race. Race science is what she was utilizing to justify being belong to a group she has no cultural
connection to.
or relation to.
The fine American tradition of being like, well, my great grandfather was 1/4 Swedish, so I'm Swedish.
Like literal slaves and like white immigrants to the U.S. became part of tribes because they didn't view being part of a tribe as a racial category. That is racist.
No, that stuff is relatively recent invention anyway. I mean, and to the extent that Lauren is also an idealist. I mean that in the sense that like her policy making is based on the notion that sort of ideas in people's heads are what matter.
Yeah.
You win the debate by having better ideas, not that you have some structural relation that you actually reform through, dare I say, praxis.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever. Fuck. So anyway, I guess as part of our project, right? We're trying to find a home for the gays and the queers and the bis and the transes and
everyone else
and the IA pluses.
I mean, like that's the thing. Leftists, like the few leftists, like in the U.S., have a chance to touch on people who feel alienated by like progressive bourgeois liberalism and like bourgeois like conservative republicans like leftists have an alternative to both of these things where you can like, oh, I actually believe everyone deserves universal basic goods. And
you mean even the Boston bomber? Wow.
Like actually when I was reading about Cuba and their trans policies, it was really interesting because the complete framework of why they offered like trans affirmation surgery wasn't the same reason that progressive liberals utilize of like, oh, your individual right to like do all this, but instead theirs was purely from we guarantee in our constitution health care to all, and for trans people that's their version of health care. It's not because
that's common sense.
It's literally like it's a healthcare standpoint. It's nothing like more than that to them, and it's like, they're class reductionists.
What a useful belief to have enshrined in a written constitution rather than like, I don't know, some fucking bullshit property rights.
Or like the when the Sensex, which is the LGBTQ advocacy group in Cuba, was trying to get PrEP as part of the program for free. It wasn't, oh, it'll help the gays. It's like, oh, it's actually just reduces HIV and that's good for everyone. Like,
how very utilitarian. How stark. Cool. I think that's about what we have time for.
Yeah.
We're going to finish this up. We'll throw this episode up online. I'm going to go refresh my browser tab about 8 million more times. It looks like California has just landed.
Wonderful.
It has been called for Bernie. You'll be happy to know.
Thank God.
Not by a huge margin, though, which not big enough. Anyway, but it's good. It's good. We'll take the win. And then we'll be appearing on Niall's show in a little bit.
Yeah.
So, see you all there.
Until next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.